Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started just because we've got so much more content. I know we're going to be having some folks come in, but that's one of the advantages of the fact that we are recording this. We'll be able to get that to them later. But I'm RJ Kelly, founder and chief visionary officer for the Wealth Legacy family of companies here in lovely San Diego. And it's my great honor and delight to have for a second day a man who has first of all, he's a mentor to so many of us in this area of families and working with families to overcome the obstacles of keeping families together. And the odds are not good, frankly, that families, and especially wealthy families, they just simply are not going to last. We're going to review that in a minute. But Tom Rogerson has become, not only is he a great mentor to so many across the country, but he has become just an absolute wonderful friend. Anytime I see his name or I get to have a few minutes with him, I learn something from him, but more importantly, my heart smiles all the rest of the day. So Tom, thank you so much for, again, coming for day two. We didn't scare you away from after day one. So thank you so much for making time. And as some of you heard a moment ago, and by the way, I hope those of you who are on screen, I hope you won't be offended if my wife turns off your video camera, just so we won't have a distraction. But no offense intended. And I'm going to hit Tony's as well. But anyway, so glad to have you with us today. I'm going to bust in and make some things okay. Get that working. So again, a quick flyby again on Tom and his background and the wonderful work that he and his wife, Kathy, are doing. They're really recognized as leaders and pioneers in this space of working with what's called family governance, fancy term, but it just means that how do we have guidelines and guardrails, but in a way that enhances and protects and grows. It's not designed to be restrictive other than from just having guidelines. They've created something we're going to be looking into a little more deeply today, the 7 steps to healthy family governance. And we're going to lean into 2 of those areas especially. We just don't have a great deal of time. Fortunately, we're going to get you a link. We're going to email you a link to a presentation that Tom and Kathy did, 3 different presentations with the Rady's hospital group on their event last month or the month before. Time flies, but that way you'll be able to get more of Tom Rogerson and a greater depth in the 7 steps to healthy family governance. As well, for myself, I've been in practice over 30 years. Wealth Legacy Group and Wealth Legacy family of companies is actually 6 different brands. And I come from an entrepreneurial background. My father died when I was 18, and I watched a multi-million dollar company go bankrupt within 10 years. And more, just as important to losing the wealth, but was losing the relational wealth, because many that I had grown up with that had worked for my family business, my father's business, were gone. They lost their jobs. And so I made a commitment to find and create a company that would be able to work particularly with business families to help them integrate the wills and the trusts and the insurance and the investments and the retirement planning and the business succession and the philanthropy, all of those things together. And that's what we do. So our wonderful team, our in-house attorney, I saw logged in a minute ago, Brian. So great to have, and my wife's our COO, holds the whole team together. So grateful for that. And also Olha, I haven't mentioned you, but Olha's our wonderful marketing manager as well. So our goal is to create an integration and a comprehensive plan together. But on top of that, what's emerged, I do have a master's in financial, in the areas of financial planning. And then my subspecialty is in the area of tax. I still rely on great tax CPAs like Bill Super, who we were chatting with at the beginning. But the point is that I'm brought in again and again, almost every day, to talk about tax mitigation, either deferral or tax elimination strategies, some of which you're going to see at the end of our presentation today. So with that, a couple of other things. We're going to thank you, yes, for the folks that sent us great feedback yesterday. Thank you so much. That was helpful. We're going to be addressing some of that. And again, we'll get you that link so you can hear from the symposium some answers. There's a chat feature. Do send in your questions you might have for today. And if we have any time left today, we're going to be giving you about 60 minutes of content. And then for those who want to stay on, we'll be doing a Q&A afterwards if you want to. And we'll be also sending you a survey later today. Give us your feedback. Our goal for the series yesterday was to talk about the perspective and implications of this enormous financial tsunami that is now begun, upwards of $66 trillion. And More importantly to both Tom and I is the common reasons for the failure in the family. And that also then secondarily, when the family disappears, the wealth tends to disappear as well. Today, we're going to just do a quick flyby on some of the things we talked about yesterday, but specifically talk about how do we deal with those issues and what can we do to not just preserve the family generationally, but what can we do to enhance the family relationships generationally. And oh, by the way, that will also keep the wealth intact as well. So again, quick recap of yesterday, that there's an economic tsunami. It is massive. It is the largest transition of wealth ever in human history, and certainly in the history of capitalism, upwards of $66 trillion. And if you want to know how much that is in terms of what that feels like means, listen to yesterday's event. But one of the key points from yesterday is that so many families are failing. It's not a mafia family. We're not just talking about people getting rubbed out. No, people are still living, but it's just they're not talking to each other. They have no idea who their third or fourth cousins are, yet alone their second or first cousins. I mean, they just aren't even talking with each other, and even siblings. 60 to 70% of families disintegrate by the end of the second generation. But on top of that, going to the next generation, it's upwards of 80 to 90% are gone. And again, the point from yesterday, and again, we'll hit this today, is that the erosion of the wealth that comes is because the family is no longer in existence, which then oftentimes leads to, in fact, the wealth disappearing as well. It's not because of poor or incomplete planning. No, it's focused on the family. And it comes from a lack of trust and communication around this group decision-making process. Family members, after the parents, the guardrails are gone, they don't know how to talk to each other. They don't know how to plan together. They don't know how to work cooperatively. And sadly, most estate planning professionals, attorneys, CPAs, financial advisors like myself, do not recognize the importance of this family dynamic. They're focused solamente uno at the financial. That's it. I remember talking in a gym one day with a guy who was bragging about all the work that he was doing with wealthy families. And he was talking about how he was getting wealth from one generation to the next. And I asked him, well, what are you doing to prepare the family for the wealth? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what are you doing to do more than just simply get $1.20 down after $1? It just didn't register with him whatsoever, had no comprehension. And sadly, that's what I find too often with other financial advisors, attorneys, CPAs, and so forth. It's just it's a damage control game. Well, to see if we get starting out with $1, and if I can get 80 cents to the next generation, that's a win. No, that's not a win. But unfortunately, that's where most traditional planning, that's where it starts and ends. So family meetings, one of the things we talked about yesterday, and again, we'll talk about today. Family education, learning about each other. Who are you really? That's a lifelong learning process. And the point of having these family meetings is to build trust, to preserve and deepen relationships, to be able to practice some of this group decision-making that Tom's going to get into more, and deepen those relationships, because it's all about creating resilience. Here's the point, is that we're also going to talk about something we alluded to yesterday. We're going to unpack a little bit more today, the fast trust. Very clever idea. Absolutely imperative that any family of any substance at all have a fast trust. And I'm so excited for you to get to hear more about it. I happen to call that more the family legacy trust. But again, it's such a great idea. It's about family culture. And that's really what governance is all about. It's about family culture. And this is not something you want to try at home on your own. No, sir. You better have some folks that know what they're doing, like Tom and Kathy. And we'll conclude with these 2 points and get in today. The opposite of control is participation. The opposite of control is participation, particularly for those type A personalities or the entrepreneurs in the room. Yeah, we're trying to keep control of the whole process. No, it's where we want to invite participation from all aspects. And then this point, again, I want to re-hit it because it's so critical and especially important today in this COVID environment, and hopefully soon post-COVID environment that we're coming out of, is that relationships create resilience. Relationships create resilience. Yep, good to have relationships outside the family, but it starts with our family of origin. Okay, so again, a few things from yesterday will apply into today, that both from my mentor and mentor to so many thousands of us, Roy Williams and the Williams Group, and then Tom and Kathy have updated some of the numbers as well to today, is that 50% of the time, the reason why families disintegrate, half of the time, is found to be because trust has broken down in that group decision-making process. There's a sense that people just simply don't trust each other. Family members don't trust each other, and they tiptoe around each other. Conflict is avoided. It's, it's just like that, stop walking on eggshells kind of thing. It's like, well, they're really in a bad mood. Well, they're kind of in a bad mood all the time. So you never make that opportunity to have conversations. We're going to talk about that today and what to do. Now, I inverted so I'm going to blow the whistle on myself here. I inverted some numbers. The 15% of the reasons why families fail, and also why the wealth kind of goes bye-bye, is because the family members were unprepared for that wealth. Now, in previous studies, it's been a much higher number, but fortunately, there's a lot more education that's being provided to heirs and beneficiaries. In fact, the Williams Group themselves has a wonderful book and program called Preparing Heirs. But unfortunately, 30% now of the reason why families fall apart is because family members lack unity, a sense of purpose, and a sense of belongingness. It's like, I don't belong in this family. And so therefore, go in their own way. Again, about 5% of the reason is because advisors blew it somehow, gave them bad information. We got off pretty lucky in this whole outcome. But anyway, did want to clarify those numbers were inverted from yesterday. So with that, I'm going to turn the speaking platform back to my friend, Tom Rogerson. He's going to start walking us through the 7 steps to healthy family governance. Tom.
Great. Thank you very much, RJ. It's great. Oh, I need to be host for a minute to grab the slides. It's great to be not only with you, RJ. RJ, I consider to be kind of a brother from another mother. So we get along not only professionally, but we share a lot of values along the way. So we're really thrilled to be able to bring this together, because everything I do really sets up the ability for RJ to put the plan together so that it actually is accomplishing the family purpose. So hopefully you're going to see what that looks like in just a minute. Are you able to allow me?
I stopped sharing, but maybe I neglected to make you a co-host. I got probably there we go. And
well, yesterday I can start off by just saying we talked about the 7-step process. We don't have time to take you through all steps of it, but RJ did talk about the fact that if you'd like to actually hear a longer webinar that actually does get into each one of the steps, I had a chance to do with Rady Children's Hospital, a professional symposium just a few weeks ago, actually, that and it was 3 parts. So, and each one was a little bit longer. So we had a chance to really dive into some of this material quite extensively. And especially part 3 of that, I think you might find particularly interesting, because there's some concepts there that people were asking about in the reviews that we're not going to have a chance to get into today. But it's that whole entrepreneurial mindset. What does it look like to build one in a family? But I encourage you to take a look at some of that material, because we go through the 7-step process in more detail. But today we're going to focus on a couple of them that we teed up yesterday that people seem interested in beforehand. And so the 7-step process, as I said, works from a foundation upwards of an assessment, and then an education of the family of what's going on in the world. Communication, can we talk? Can somebody show us our leadership style? Values, what are our individual values and our definition of that, and stories behind it. That leads to conflict management. We're going to talk about that in a minute, which leads to actions we can take to try and practice decision making. That's the biggest reason families are failing. So why don't we practice it? And that all leads to then endowing the process. If this works, let's endow it. And we're going to talk about the conflict management. in a little bit more detail today, and we're going to talk a little bit about the seventh step advancement as well. I mentioned that my wife and has joined me, and we started GenLeg Co. And she brings relationship coaching. She was doing it with families beforehand. We just thought it made sense to blend that into what I was doing separately and form a company around the whole thing. But she brands what other people call different forms of safe conversation or imago dialogue, things like that. Most of those are designed for more couple type conversations, one-on-one type conversations. And we're trying to change the culture and dynamic of a larger family. And so we blended some things together you will have seen before, along with some wisdom that we just from seeing families that were working successfully, blended some of that in. And we call this joint program called empathic communication. And hopefully you're going to benefit from getting a sense of what that is. But instead of avoiding conflict on one side till there's an explosion and jumping over to the, the fast split or the expensive mediation, what would it look like to move intentionally into that space of practicing and managing conflict? And the railroad tracks I showed you yesterday with those cross ties that connect and strengthen, those cross ties are activities we can engage in where we can practice decision making. So ideally, we have a method of dealing with that's going to cause conflict. So ideally, we have a method of helping to deal with conflict. As I mentioned yesterday, if you don't, well, I mentioned yesterday, if a family says they don't have conflict, they're just avoiding it. So every family has conflict. Every major relationship you have, there's conflict periodically. Do we have the ability of getting into it, or do we skirt it? The more we skirt it, the more the relationship is actually drifting apart. Kathy words it this way, that if you don't know their, meaning the people we're trying to make decisions with, if we don't know their vision and their expectations, we can't understand their disappointments and their resentments. We may feel the disappointments and the resentment, and we may take it personally, but it may be because we don't know what their vision was. We don't know what their expectations were. Now, some of all of this and some of this whole getting into the relationship does relate to business, the whole notion of brain science. And I don't want to become brain scientist here for you, but I want to give you just a little bit of a sense of it, because within a family, it's different than with your friends, because the brain develops while you're building a relationship with your family. By the time you're making your lifelong friends in college and after college, you have a much more fully developed brain, but not when you're building a relationship with your siblings and sometimes even your parents. So because what happens is, as the brain develops, it develops at the stem first, which is that reaction, that fight or flight, that kind of, they call it the lizard brain, but it's the first part of the brain that actually reacts when something happens. You don't think about it, it just happens. Tap your knee goes out. That is an impulse causing a reaction without thinking about it. Around about 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, all the way up to early teens, we add into that our emotions. And you see young kids, I mean, when they have an impulse, it turns immediately into a temper tantrum because their emotions are right there as well. They still are not, they don't have the prefrontal cortex to think about it, because that part, the cortex and the prefrontal cortex, is the last part of brain development. And it's not fully developed till you're about 25 or 26 years old. Well, that means I built a relationship with my brother and sister before I had a thinking brain. I had a reacting brain, not a thinking brain. And I may have formed an impression of how to work with them and how they work with me. I may have informed an impression of them based on that, not on the reality of who they are today. Are we willing to rewrite the story of these people that we call family to take into account how they are actually today? They may act the role because we're brother and sister. They may be very different people. And so what you see in reactions, and hopefully rational reactions, is there's a trigger. This is the trigger choice cycle. There's a trigger. Somebody in my family says something and it's my trigger. And right away I have an impulse. That fight or flight. I want to, and if I react at that point, what I say at that point might actually be the trigger for the other person, and we're off to the races. But if I don't react at that point, hopefully I have a chance to get to awareness, and move from the trigger to the impulse to awareness, think about it a little bit, and maybe weigh the choices of what to do. And then I can create a behavior, but the behavior now, if this is now my reaction at the behavior point, I had a chance to bring my prefrontal cortex into it, and it can be more thoughtful, less damaging. And that's what I meant by, if I've had a problem with you the last 10 times I tried to talk to you, and it just hasn't worked, coming the next time and just speaking louder doesn't typically change the result. If I can slow down, think about it, and actually have a method of what I might want to try differently, that can totally change the interaction. Because as I mentioned before, putting this off to the side, if a trigger happens, and if I were to, at the impulse state, react, then what often happens is that reaction is the trigger for the person I'm talking to. And all of a sudden they're in their impulse state, and we're off to the races. Are we arguing about what I talked about, or are we arguing about the trigger that may have been how I said it, or the inflection? Could have been any number of things that could be the trigger, but it may not be. We're not using our rational brain yet, and yet we're having an argument. If we can hold off on the reaction until we get to the behavior point where we had a chance to, yes, I have an impulse, but let me think about it, and hopefully weigh some choices, and then have a rational behavior. If that's my reaction, it is a much higher likelihood of potentially starting to change the dynamic. And so I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like in a minute, of what that could do. What are the tools to have you change, to slow it down, and thinking and doing and evidencing to the other person that you can do this differently. The Green family of Hobby Lobby fame is sort of my poster child for this. I just love the fact that they're one of the families that we researched in some of the work that we did in families that are succeeding. But David Green is one of the Forbes 400. I mean, he's one of the top 100 wealthiest people in America, billions of dollars. We're not talking little. But he started out picking cotton on weekends with his family to make some extra money. So he comes from that entrepreneurial incubator that we talked about yesterday. And but he's now very wealthy. But it was interesting when we went out to meet with them to talk to about what they were doing successfully, and all that, and or what failed along the way. We had a chance to spend 3 days with them, and the first day we spent with Mart, one of the sons of David, and he said, we have a family meeting every month, and we have agendas, and we celebrate the people that had birthdays that month, and we celebrate individuals for successes in their life, and we have it in a special room. We call it the legacy room, and we have kind of family iconography around pictures and portraits and mission statements and of the business, and just it feels like a family museum, that it's like a sacred space, a family space. Many of the families we work with, and they have a family meeting, they might be doing it at the Holiday Inn, conference room, but they bring with them a little bag and put up some of these things, these posters of their mission statement and poster pictures, and they want to create, this is the environment we're in, this is our history, these are the people that we're talking about. And too, well, the Greens do the same thing, and it sounded cool. I mean, it really sounded, I couldn't believe they're meeting every month, and people are flying in, not private jet, coach, even though they could do the other way around. Well, the second day we met with David Green, and he said, in the last 40 years in building this business, we've only had 3 family meetings. And I said, David, wait a minute. Mart yesterday said you have a family meeting every month. What do you, how do I just, and he said, oh yeah, he's talking about the meetings where we get together and focus on the family and learn about each other and build, that sense of where we're coming from and who we are. And yeah, that's what he's talking about. I'm talking about the 3 times we got together and talked about the business. When I mention a family business to most business owners, they right away think, oh yeah, we're going to get together and talk about the business, or the money, or the plan, or the trust, it's got to be about the money, right? That's what's important. The Greens get together once a month, and they build, and what was really powerful to me, the third day when we were with the Green family, we had a chance to meet one of the granddaughters, and she was with her new husband, only married like 3-4 months. And the new husband said, yeah, this family's incredible. They included me in these monthly meetings and the activity of the family. when we were just dating. I mean, significant others. And I just feel like so connected. I know them, they know me. To know and to be known, as I said yesterday, is foundational for human. And it's what RJ was referring to. It builds resilience. And he was saying this about the Green family, not his bloodline family, the Green family. And then he said the line that blew me away. He said, they recognize that we need to build the bridge of grace and trust so we can drive the truck of truth over it. You need to speak truth, but can we speak truth without ticking off the other person that we're talking to? How do you speak truth without it? You have to speak truth or you're actually falling apart. You're avoiding conflict. But how do you do it in a way that isn't upsetting the other person? And they build that bridge to drive the truck over it. Well, the difference is that most people, when they get together and want to hash out an issue, they want to get to an agreement. And an agreement is focusing on, typically when I'm engaging in trying to get into an agreement, I'm focusing on proving my point. And I want the other person to come over to my way of thinking. I want to win. And I want to be right. But getting to a place of understanding, and there's so many quotes on this notion of, people want to be understood more than they want to they want to be understood more than they want to understand. So, but getting to a place of understanding of the other person, it's focusing on what the other person is saying and not trying to defend myself or explain myself. Even oftentimes my explanation is my defense. Active listening is required, where I have to be in, because most people, when they're listening, they're not listening. They're thinking what they're going to say as soon as that person shuts up. I mean, I've got my answer already. I'm decked up. And they're arguing with themselves of what they're going to say to win this argument before. So they're actually not listening. How do we actively listen? And this requires empathy. I have to want to actually get to understand where they're coming from and the difficulty that they're dealing with, and be able to walk in their shoes. That old notion, you don't have to agree to understand. I do not have to say at the end of a conversation, I agree with you. I've been wrong. It's okay to say, look, I can sense the angst you feel. I mean, I can understand that would have been really difficult. And just to be there to empathize with them. And I'd like to process this. I'd like to come back and talk about it. So notice I haven't defended myself. I purely let them hopefully vent in this process. So what does it look like? To do this, you need to be truly curious, be looking for opportunities to expand the conversation. When they say something, they've got an issue, I don't want to defend myself. I want to let them expand it. Can you inflate that balloon more? Because I think there's more behind that. And maybe where's it come from? Is it all me, or is it coming from somewhere else? So how do you do this? How do you get into this space? It seems like we're getting into torture, but my wife views that there are 5 key elements to what she refers to as this empathic communication. And not to get biblical on you, but to some degree, I mean, some of the insights we've seen are very faith-based. I mean, if you look at the Old Testament and look at Job, I don't know how many of you for fun would read Job. It's one of the longest books in the Bible, and it's very depressing for a lot of it. But there's a very simple message in Job. Job feels persecuted by God, not treated fairly. And he says, he laments about how horrible his life has become. And he laments, God, what is going on? But then he says, here's what I know about you, God. And he praises, he talks about the positives that he knows. And then he says, can you help me figure this out? I can't reconcile those two. That's a much less threatening way to be able to say something positive while I'm trying to indicate the feeling I have, not accusation, but the feeling I have. And I know this about you. Can you help me figure it out? That's very different. And you're going to see the steps in empathic communication can actually help you give that impression of what this looks like as well. So first of all, don't ambush somebody. So many people feel like, somehow at the end of the evening when they've had enough to drink or something, and the other person's had enough to drink and we're yucking it up, this is the time because we seem to be getting along. It's not the time. And there are many times that aren't the time. So it's best to ask for an appointment. Hey, and I've got something I want to talk to you about, RJ. I think it'll take about a half an hour. It's just weighing on my heart. Is there a time we could get together? And because it's okay for them to say no, but okay, great, but when can we do it? I'd like to get it together. When we're together and I want to articulate my point, or I want them to articulate their point, And I asked them questions of, hey, here's what I'm feeling. What, can you help me out? I'm worrying where this is coming from. Mirroring is the idea of literally repeating exactly what they said. So it requires two parts. They have to shorten what they're going to say, or I can't repeat it. I can't repeat a paragraph, but I can repeat a couple of sentences. So mirroring is, and what mirroring, it might sound kind of dumb. It's really important because it stops you from having the ability to be thinking of what you're going to say next, because you have to be listening because you're going to repeat it. And it gives you multiple bites at the apple. I have a chance now, hopefully, to hear when they spoke. I have a chance to hear again when I say what they spoke, and doesn't guarantee I'm going to get it, because sometimes I got a thick skull, but it's much higher likelihood that I'm going to get it and get a sense of where they're coming from. Clarifying is to be that curiosity. Did I get that right? Can you expand on that? Can you say more? And then identifying the underlying emotion. Where's that coming from? That's what I meant by, is there history to this? Is this something that comes from something in the past? And ideally, you're expressing an appreciation. I can see that that's really difficult, and I can see that that some of my actions could have caused that. And expressing an appreciation. I don't intend that, and I don't think you intend. If I've had a frustration, I don't think you intend that either. I really trust you. I want to work with you. Saying a positive is a very important thing. Whether you do it in the beginning or end, you can fit it in. But combine that together. My wife has a very prescriptive way to do it to get a group started. But notice when I'm done, I didn't defend myself. If I want to do that, if I want to express my frustration, guess what I need to do? Make an appointment and
Mhm.
ideally have a chance to think about it, and be able to come back and talk about it a little bit later on. But that's a great way to do it. RJ, I see you popping back up.
Let's see if I can clear my throat here. Yeah, it reminds me of a situation that came up with someone who was very, very close to me. And they had something that was very important for them to say. And at one point in my life, I thought I was going to be a marriage and family therapist. So one of the skills that I learned early on was the skill of reflective listening or mirroring. And this person was sharing their frustration with me about a certain point, and I was reflecting back to them and mirroring. But instead of it helping them feel encouraged or supported, I found that it was actually inflaming them to the point where they were getting more and more upset. Finally, I stopped and I said, I'll just use a name, Sally. I thought, please help me understand. I'm trying to reflect back what I'm hearing you say, and yet it seems like it's inflaming the situation more than it's helping the situation. And her response was, you're doing a perfect job of reflecting back to me what I'm saying, but you're not listening with a heart to be changed by what you hear. Which, there's a couple of points there. Number one, from my standpoint, I was not coming with an empathetic point of view. I was reflecting back to them, but not from a heart that was empathetic and really wanting to understand their point of view. I was just using a technique. And that gets pretty hollow. If you're just using a technique because Tom Rogerson said, well, you should do this, no, you better drill down or just probably not even go there. But on the other hand, this person was wanting me to see their point of view because they wanted me to agree with them. And I wasn't ready to agree with them. I just wanted to reflect back. So there's two parts to that. We have to be very careful, I think, when we're sharing. And if the other person is listening and responding, but if they don't choose to accept my point of view, that's okay. The point of it
Yeah.
is let's find understanding. Let's be willing to listen. And then one of the other things that Stephen Covey talks about, the late Stephen Covey, is that most of us from a listening standpoint are not listening to understand. We're listening to get our point across as soon as the other person takes a breath or stops talking, or even worse, some people just butt in before the speaker is finished with their point because they're so ready to respond back. Covey's point, and I think, again, Tom, what I'm hearing you say as well, we need to truly listen and reflect back, again, not with a heart of, oh, look at me, I'm doing this right. No, to really reflect back from, am I getting that right? Not that I have to agree with what the other person is saying, but to be able to help them feel that I truly am listening at the deepest level. So
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great example of it, because this is a tool, but remember from the previous slide, it requires that empathy that RJ just doubled down on, and it requires curiosity, a willingness to eat. Can you inflate that balloon more and actually show, I want to know, I want to understand you. Again, that is very different than we normally would. I want to normally, when we get into it, we want to understand just enough so I know how to come back and defend. So, and an explanation, we think an explanation is not a defense. If I just, but if here's how it looks though. If we're having a disagreement and we both are obviously recognizing there's a disagreement and I'm explaining myself, I'm basically saying, well, here's the reason that it's not my fault. So I'm agreeing that there's a problem and I'm giving you a good understanding, or hopefully, of why it's not my fault. Who have I just said whose fault it is? If we got a problem and it's not my problem, it's your fault. That's what I'm saying. And so explaining yourself, cut it off at the neck. Don't let it happen. Not in empathic communication, not when you're trying to change that dynamic. This isn't something you do all the time, but it's a great way to stop a pattern of how we were communicating historically, and how we can make it healthy going forward. So let me move on, because I don't want to go over, and when we've got a lot that RJ wants to cover as well. I just want to jump into I hope that'll help you with the empathic communication, getting a sense of what some of the steps are. If you want a little bit more detail on that, we can send you, some material, but just let us know. But I want to get to that advancement, because that's the notion where what RJ does and what we do as a relationship coach or as a family coach, legacy coach, work together. That ideally the family purpose that we can unearth is actually incorporated into the plan. I mean, when somebody reads my will, they ought to get a sense of who I was. And most wills, if you read them, it looks like the person must have cared about minimizing taxes and controlling things for the rest of the next person's life. That's not really my values. My values is I really care about these people. Why isn't that in the document? Why isn't that somehow there? So what does it look like to blend these things together? Most estate plans are today are designed to do one of three things: divide the assets equally amongst the children, let them do whatever they want, which is using the money to grease the skids of separation. I was telling you yesterday that families are automatically using their wealth to allow separation. The estate plan often double downs on that and lets them, take their money and go and do their own thing. But that means that there isn't a learning system. They're still not making any decisions together. They're not learning about, if one of them makes a mistake, should the next one just repeat it because they never learned the lesson by even talking to the other person about the mistake? So there needs to be this kind of somehow working together to combat this divide and conquer mentality, which is problematic, and yet it's very common in estate planning. The second thing we see is that the parents try and force interdependence and working together. So they'll set up structures designed to enforce it. They'll put the vacation house in a trust and say share it, because it unified us while we were alive. We all got together on 4th of July and had a great time at the lake house, and everybody camped out, bunk rooms, and everything was great, right? So we'll just keep going when we're gone. That's not what happens. As soon as the parents are gone, one family gets it for June, one gets it July, one gets it August, and they never see each other. They have the cleaning crew come in between, and it isn't a unifying place anymore. It's a place that they separately use. That's not the unification that we had before. Or they set up a family foundation and they kind of require the kids to give to, and what's interesting about those two, we did a study of family offices asking, can you name some things that worked well in your family and name some things that were really bad? So good things we should all do, bad things we should all avoid. Interestingly, there were two things on both those lists. Some families said, these things you have to do, they will save your family. But other families said about the same two things, don't touch these things, they are poison. They will kill your family. Those two things were a family foundation and a family vacation house. So what we looked at in a further study is why. Why did those that love it, and why did those that hate it? Was the amount of money, the location of the lake house, the kind of cause we gave to the? It wasn't any of those things. The difference was how it was introduced. Those that said they hated it, the whole thing was set up behind closed doors by the parent and the wealth advisor, or the planner. Those that said they loved it, and many times families felt forced into it. Those that said they loved it generally said they were allowed to come in at younger ages and participate and learn how to do it while the parents were still alive with their brothers and sisters. RJ.
Tom, we've got an extraordinary example of the point you're just making here. The Jacobs family, not the Jacobs Qualcomm, but the Jacobs engineering family, sold their business years ago for almost $1 billion. And Joe and Vi Jacobs wanted to set up a family foundation. And so, but there's a little bit of a collision between the, shall we say, political and cultural viewpoints of Gen 1 and Gen 2. Gen 1, Joe and Vi Jacobs, were very conservative in their orientation. The three girls, who I believe all three of them attended Cal Berkeley, which gives you a little bit of indication about sort of the different bent of mind. When Joe decided, excuse me, when Joe decided to create the Family Foundation, he basically said, okay, girls, we want you to be a part of this, and here's how it's going to work. But it was very clear that how it was going to work was how Joe wanted it to work, not inclusively. So the three daughters, and I'm going to guess it was probably Valerie, who is an extraordinary, extraordinary individual and was a marriage and family therapist and speaks to very wealthy families as well across the country on how to bring people together. But she went to the folks and said, look, if it's going to be the Jacobs Family Foundation, then all of us have an equal voice in terms of the outcomes. We need to find some things that we can work on together. But if it's all about just being a rubber stamp to what you and mom want to do, well, we're not interested in participating. So Joe said very wisely, let me get back to you on that. He made an appointment to get back to her. And he got back to the daughters and said, look, your mom and I have talked about it. We do want this to be something that is involving all of us. We're going to find some ways that we can give back and be involved as a family, equal voices. And mom and I will do the things that we want to support. We'll do that on our own with our own funds. But we do want this to be something that's inclusive of all. So the Jacobs Center for Neighborhood Innovation in the Diamond District here in San Diego is having extraordinary impact and has for decades now. But it's because of coming to that place where it would be inclusive and everyone was valued the same, as opposed to we're the parents and you're going to do what we say to do.
Wow, that's a great example. I'm going to keep going because I want to get RJ the time he needs to cover some of the material he's going to cover. I'm just pointing out that, like RJ just said, these issues of trying to force an outcome by the structure ideally are introduced earlier. The Jacobs family, they did it earlier, and it's having a very positive outcome. And with children involvement, they own it. And that's really key to what we're talking about here, rather than let them figure it out. So that's the second thing we see in a traditional estate plan that often causes more damage than success. And the third one is where they pick a purely discretionary trustee and let the trustee kind of play the role. You saw yesterday when I was talking about the husband and wife, and they had 3 children, and the petition of the child gets responded by the parent, petition of the child responds by the parent, and it's treating children like children for the rest of their lives. And what would it look like to actually have the children have more of working together, interaction with the trustee? Some of that relates to governance, really important in the things with the governance. You're going to see what that can look like in the trust, that fast trust, that legacy trust that RJ was talking about, that Marvin Blum and I created a number of years ago. We can get you an article on that if you'd like. But purely discretionary trusts are often treating children like children forever instead of treating them like adults. How do we change this? This is the normal plan. Some iteration of these are what we normally see. And family values and family purpose are almost never included. I mean family purpose, not the parent's purpose, but the family purpose where they're involved. So I'm going to jump over one and just say, so what I think one of the best visions of this was put together by David York. He has a wonderful, simple vision of what a traditional estate plan should look like, blended together with family governance and family purpose. And it's as simple. I mean, I love Jackie Onassis's quote for this: all things elegant are not, excuse me, all things simple are not elegant, but all things elegant are simple. And David York has a wonderful, simple little picture that the family purpose should drive the plan, and the plan should support the family purpose. And if we really, really talk about the family purpose that we agree on and design a plan to accomplish that, then the money gets to go along for the ride in the middle. And we have the money becomes a resource to accomplish good things within the family that everybody wants to be part of. It's a wonderful image. It's simple. It's elegant. It's almost never happening in reality. It's a unicorn. What happens in reality is the the money, the tax minimization, the control concerns of the parents, the structures the advisor can put in place drive the planning process. And the planning process supports the control issues, the money, the tax minimization, all that. And the family purpose is over in left field and nobody ever really focused on it. So we're a huge advocate of people like RJ and people like, Jen Legg, my wife and I, working together, that if we can work with the family to help them think through some of these things as a group, it doesn't end up that the next generation says, we want to squander the money and be layabouts. That's not what comes out. They actually come out with a plan that the parents often say, wow, that would be great. But now the children own it. So the FAST trust is a trust, one of the types of trust that we think could add to this and help build this out. FAST stands for Family Advancement Sustainability Trust. It doesn't replace the entire estate plan. There'll be all the kinds of trusts that you want to have. It's just an additional trust. Most trusts are designed to distribute money to the beneficiaries, and they can take it and go out and buy things. I can buy a pen and I own it and I can hold it. The fast trust design, you as a beneficiary don't buy, you don't get cash. You don't get money. They're not giving you money that you can go buy things. They're investing in you. And so the things you walk away with are in your head. They'll run family meetings, pay for the facilitation, they'll pay for the training, the education of families. I mentioned, to get this ball rolling with many families, I'll say, the parents we work with are the kind of people, like most of the wealthy people we meet, they're the kind of people that are more likely to endow a chair at university to help educate strangers than they are to endow a chair at the family table to help educate their family. And they right away would recoil and say, what do you mean? We pay for education. Yeah, but you're paying for your children to be educated separately somewhere else. We're talking about educating them as part of what it means to be a member of the family. And that is the difference. So the funds that are used from the FAST are designed to do multiple things. We're going to provide all these slides for you, and I'm going over, so I don't want to spend much more time on this, but it is to provide for running the meeting and for paying for the facilitation and the education. And it requires not only the information, it requires governance of family members and outside members to keep it on point multi-generationally. Families that are succeeding have to have family meetings, and they need to be endowed. We were finding that in all the research. It just wasn't as organized as we've tried to put it in this example here. It was more accidental, but it accomplished the same thing. We tried to make it a little bit more purposeful so it could be part of more people's plans. My wife and I have 4 children. We have 6 trusts. 4 kids, 6 trusts. One is for each of them, 4 individual trusts to empower the individuals. But the other 2, we call our thumbs up trusts, are designed to empower the group. One is a foundation type structure, and the other is a fast structure to encourage the family to endow the meeting process, to endow getting together. And they bought into it. They own it, which means they have BOE, buy-in to ownership to empowerment. The goal is that we want them to run the family meeting. The curriculum's a whole thing. They're doing it now, but now it's funded. So when we're gone, they continue to do it. So I'll finish with this. If you want to go fast, go alone. All the entrepreneurs we work with know what we're talking about. But if you want to go far, go together. Legacy, multi-generation, those words mean it has to go far. If it's going to go far, we have to go together. And usually wealth is not used to encourage that knowledge and that wisdom of each other. Then the plan succeeds.
Great stuff, Tom. And that's why I wanted to front load your content, because it's so valuable. I've got now in my remaining time together. And by the way, gang, we were We're not quite sure why the chat box disappeared, but for some reason the chat window is gone today. So I'm sorry about that, but we're going to unmute the phones once we get to the end here for those that want to stay on. But we're going to be probably going right up to the hour with content. So I hope that's okay with you. But again, our feelings aren't hurt when you need to drop off. Mark Twain pointed out a great saying, and that is what gets us in trouble. And I'm going to close this window so I can see a little bit is not what we don't know. What gets us in trouble is what we know for sure that just ain't so. So what I'm referring to right now is most wealthy, affluent Americans understand they have an obligation to support the social well-being of the country. I mean, for all its faults, and certainly we've had some on display these last couple of years, and especially this last year, but they understand that, you know what, for all its faults, it's still the best country in the world. My wife and I are both very, very proud Americans. My wife's a survivor of the killing fields of Cambodia, lived under the communists for 3.5 years in a prison. Boy, trust me, she understands what freedom is about, and we love this country. But unfortunately, most wealthy, affluent Americans don't understand, or they've not been told by their advisors, because either their advisor doesn't know or their advisor does know but doesn't know how to use it, is that the government gives us a choice in how we support the social well-being of the country. Now, if we don't choose, they will choose for us. And guess what that's called? Everybody? Yep, it's called taxes. But so in our remaining time today and in my portion, I want to help you understand that this is going to be a radical thought. Hang with me though. Capital gains taxes are optional. Even federal estate or inheritance taxes, which are probably going up, by the way, if you don't opt out, but they are optional. This Medicare surtax, that's optional as well. In fact, a third to half of our income taxes are optional. Do you sense a theme here? By the way, again, I'm not some anarchist that's talking about rebelling against country. No, this is actually built in to the tax code. So this is all optional if you choose in advance how you're going to support the social well-being of the country, and in a way that's in alignment with your own family's value system. So to do that, I'm just going to give you a real quick flyby of history of philanthropy in the United States. And I'm also going to hide something on my screen here, so it gets it out of the way for me. There we go. So, and there's a point in this, so do stay with me. In the mid-60s, there was a significant movement to support more philanthropy and charity. And so it created the 1969 Tax Reform Act. And from that, there were a number of tools and techniques and strategies. We call them split interest gifts, meaning that it's okay to do something good for yourself and your family as long as you're doing something good for other people's families, or some kind of philanthropy. And so, for example, if you're willing to support the social well-being of the country, nice things will happen for you too. Like what you ask? Well, how about starting with, we'll forgive all of the taxes on the sale of an asset. Well, in California, if you're selling a piece of real estate or you're selling a business or other appreciated asset, above certain limits, you are looking at almost a 40% tax between federal long-term capital gains, state ordinary income, and that 3.8% Medicare surtax you're talking about. So what if I told you we could forgive, eliminate, stop, end all of that tax, and at the same time, receive an inflation-adjusted income stream, and it could even go multi-generationally as long as 3 years. Sorry, 3 generations, 3 years, as long as 3 generations. That's about 100 years, gang, maybe even longer. Not only that, but the assets are protected against creditors, and there are significant income tax deductions as well. But how does that apply? I'm going to give you a real quick flyby on 3 different type of case examples. The first one is what I call using a capital gains alternative trust. Why is it an alternative? It's because it's an alternative to paying capital gains taxes. The next one is a lovely family here that have a real passion for something, but frankly, they don't have a lot of net worth. I mean, comparatively speaking. So how could they help something come about for this tremendous vision and passion that they have? And then the last one is this, again, a lovely couple that we met But unfortunately for them, it was about 6 weeks after they'd had a major liquidity event that created $2.1 million in tax. So we came along to see what we could do to reduce the taxes. So in my remaining 7 minutes, hang tight. Here we go. So this was a triplex that this couple owned up in Los Angeles. They had bought it many years before for about $500,000. The depreciated basis by taking depreciation was only $35,000. So if they sold that, they were going to have an enormous amount of tax to pay. And that was the plan, frankly, was to sell it because the property was worth over $2 million. Now, when I asked in terms of probing, I found out, okay, we're getting about 50,000, a little bit more net after our property taxes, improvements, and maintenance and such. He was 70, she was 65. I asked her, I love, how do you feel about managing the property? Is that something you love to do? And she rolled her eyes in the back and she said, not at all. And so the husband, this was his thing. It was not her thing, anything at all. And they were modest givers, gave to their church and a few other organizations, but nothing significant. So we were looking then at selling outright. There were several reasons why they didn't want to do a 1031 exchange. They were looking at over $100,000 in settlement costs, plus $750,000 in taxes between state, federal, and this Medicare surtax. On top of that, as I mentioned, 1031 exchange was just simply not an option. That swap till you drop, that deferring forward, which frankly, right now, just as a quick aside, I've never seen a worse time to try to do a 1031 exchange than right now. And I know I've got a couple of commercial real estate advisors on our call today, so you know what I'm talking about. So I propose that they consider a capital gains alternative trust. We looked at a number of other techniques as well, but this one bubbled up to the top as being the most appropriate for them. And that's my name for it. So you're not going to find that in the tax code for that. But it is in fact created by the 69 tax code, Tax Reform Act. And what it does is it basically eliminates all of the taxes on the sale. And in this case, I structured an income stream of 6% per year, and it's going to be 6% of whatever we can grow those assets. So if I can grow the assets at 8% and we take 6%, guess what? You're getting an inflation adjusted income stream. But what we took their income from 52,000 to 126,000. So we more than doubled the income stream. On top of that, we created a tax deduction of over $600,000 for them, so much so that it was more than they could use up. Well, guess what? They get 6 years to spread that out. The assets also protected against creditors, unknown creditors, which in California, it's almost impossible to do that. So this is a great additional benefit for that as well. And with a certain variation, not with what's called a charitable remainder trust, but with a different form of this charitable trust, we can actually buy more real estate that has debt on it inside this irrevocable trust. Normally that would kill a charitable remainder trust. It won't in this other form. The ultimate beneficiary of the money that's in here is their own family giving fund. And unfortunately today, we just don't have time to really delve into that much, but it's an alternative. My wife and I, for example, have our own family giving fund. We put money into that. We deduct it in the year that we put money in, and then we've been using it as we go forward. So for example, we had a wonderful benefit that we were able to provide for some families, 2 different families in Phnom Penh, the capital in Cambodia. And so we were able to use some of the money that we had put into that trust and then build a couple of very modest homes. And now we've made a commitment to do that every year going forward. So it's a way that we can make a difference, but we're not talking about a huge private foundation. No, we're talking about just something under an umbrella of another type of charitable organization, but we can make a difference around the world as well as here at home by putting money in there. And there's another quick aside, I'm watching my time disappear. Many of you have seen some growth in some stocks, some bonds, some mutual funds, not so much in bonds, but in mutual funds. And so it's one of the things we're doing today is we're taking some of these stocks or some of these mutual funds or things that have gone up in value we're rather than selling them and paying tax, we're making contributions of that into the charitable or the family giving trust. So we're getting a deduction at the same time, we're not paying tax on the gains. Now, there are some rules around that, so you got to chat with me about it. But anyway, that's another alternative. Quickly, on to the Smith family. Their heart, their passion has always been for the victims of human trafficking. One of the worst scourges that I've ever heard of. My wife was actually involved as a social worker on the very first human trafficking case that was being prosecuted here in San Diego, not that long ago, frankly, in the mid-90s. So this family just had a tremendous heart for these women that are coming out that are unloved and have been abused repeatedly. But what could they do? How could they make a difference? What could they do for help? They didn't have an unlimited amount of assets. So we approached them on the idea, well, why don't we maybe loan the assets for a period of time? So what this dear couple agreed to do is that for the next 10 years, they're going to take the income stream that's coming out of a special charitable trust that we've created. That money will be used to pay the principal and interest, taxes and insurance on a home, on a property, 2.5 acres of property. So they put $750,000 in this special charitable trust. It's creditor protected. It gives them an income for the rest of their lives. And at the end of that 10-year period of time, they're going to start taking the income for themselves. So for the first 10 years, though, they're making the commitment. And on the basis of that commitment, I found a regular for-profit bank that has a charitable heart. It was willing to provide a loan of 80% of the market value of the property that was being purchased. And then the charity, in this case is Refuge for Women, which is a phenomenal organization. But they were able to raise the 20% down, a couple $100,000 from other donors. And so they were able to buy these beautiful 2.5 acres. My wife and I were just there a few weeks ago. It is gorgeous. And it's a beautiful home where women can come. They're protected. They're safe. They're being given new skill sets. It's extraordinary. And oh, by the way, this is sort of an afterthought, but oh, by the way, our clients also received a $450,000 income tax deduction on that $750,000. Extraordinary. This way, it enables us a dollar to go so much further, to be able to have impact beyond, rather than just raising a whole bunch of money and have the charity buy the asset. They'd never seen this before. So we're rolling this out as a way to be able to do far more impact with fewer dollars. Now, last one, again, sweet couple. They're a couple of our favorite people. We just love them to pieces. At the time, they were 79 and 82. They had sold $7.5 million of land and a business. Unfortunately, created in the process over $2.1 million in taxes. So we came along after the fact, but it was the same tax year, and created over $3 million worth of tax deductions for them using two different ideas that were philanthropic. Now, we weren't able to take the taxes to zero, but we were able to lower it to $937,000. And had they come to us, had they found us before they made this sale, they would have paid zero. It would have been zero in taxes on that sale, and they would have gotten the deductions of over $3 million. But they were thrilled to have that bill go from 2.1 million down to 937,000. To me, that's still a lot of money. Anyway, so here we are, a quick recap. Yesterday, we looked at some of the perspective and the implications of this enormous financial tsunami that is hitting us. We looked at some of the common causes of failure and the reasons why families are blowing apart after just simply 1, 2, 3 generations. Then today, we've been giving you some specific recommendations on ways to not only preserve the family and the wealth, but really grow the family and their wealth. We've also talked about active listening and creating appointments and finding ways that we can make sure that we're listening and growing and learning who we are as a family. So where do you start? Most families, again, 60 to 70% are gone by the end of the second generation, 80 to 90% after 3 generations. The cause of this is not bad investment advice. It's the lack of trust and communication about group decision-making. Many, unfortunately, have traditional estate plans just simply they increase the probability that the family is going to erode by only concentrating on the wealth rather than concentrating on the family. So you've got to start. Where do you start? Well, start with a family meeting. Again, don't try it without having professional help, having somebody like Tom and Kathy, and we get involved in this as well. But point is, don't wait. Start simple and grow from there, because as we build our relationships, it builds our resilience. consider having a fast trust, or as I could call it, a family legacy trust. First of all, identifying what are the important aspects of your family. What are the things that really matter? What makes you a Rogerson? What makes you a Kelly? What makes you a Smith? And so understand what that is. Again, that's a process that you can get some help in facilitating. But implementing that idea, we don't have this for ourselves. And it's a commitment that I'm talking with Vimian about, because I want us to have this in our own family estate plan as well. And we're putting this in place with our other significant families. Family culture is hard to change. It takes time, and it takes skilled expertise from people that are making a difference, that have a perspective. They're not going to be taken into that the reptilian brain where they're reacting emotionally. No, got to have a big picture perspective. So to wrap it up, again, offered this yesterday. We had several people take us up on it. We want to invite you to our quote actions. It's completely free. Every day or every other day or once a week, you'll get a quote followed by a great action. You can't live a perfect day without doing something for someone who can never be able to repay you. Famous Coach John Wooden quotes that. Your action for today is to make an anonymous donation or do something nice for someone without them finding out that you did it. It's completely free. No one's going to follow up with you with a phone call. It's just something that we can give to you. We send out hundreds of these every single day. And many times we hear from others, it's the first email they open. We have a free retirement video series on our website at wealthlegacygroup.com. If you just go to the video section, you'll find it's the very first video, along with a lot of other videos on a variety of topics. And then last, if you've got a question as a result of these last couple of days, you want to just simply kind of bounce some ideas off, we do offer a complimentary 20-minute conversation to just talk about your situation and how can it go to another level. Well, unfortunately, we are over time, and because we don't have the web chat box, we can't go there. So I just want to say, on behalf of Tom and myself, this has been our extraordinary privilege to be with you. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us. Tom, I know you join me in saying that we want to impact families, one family at a time, to make lasting legacies that go beyond just 1 or 2 or 3 generations, but be generations that make a difference, so that we can have these families continue an impact in a positive way for hundreds and hundreds of years. Thanks so much. God bless. Bye for now.
Hey, RJ.
Yes.
How you doing? John Bell here.
Hey, John Bell there. You know that
Hey.
story about that family up in Escondido because you were that clever real estate agent who helped find that property. So bless your heart.
Well, but there's a bigger miracle there I wanted to share really quick. So I was going through the Chase Bank in Coronado, and one of my friends there, his name's Carlos Ramirez. My father was Charles Ramirez Bell. And I said, hey, Carlos. So there's no coincidences, you know. I said, hey, Carlos, who do you know that could do a nonprofit loan? And he said, oh, call this guy. I ended up calling the guy. And not only did he do the 80-20 loan like we were hoping for, they required 0 pledges on the other property that Refuge for Women owned. So it was a wonderful way to get it. Not only with that, but the local bank in Kentucky actually wanted to get security on the loan with all the other assets, which wouldn't make sense at all. Yeah, terrific story though.
Back on that one pretty hard, so I remember that one very, very distinctly. That's a great story. Yep, and you and I were both working our opposite ends there to get to that same place. And Chase, I got to say, Chase has been frustrating to me over the years for various reasons, but they really stepped up and they have a heart for funding philanthropic organizations. Perhaps more so than any other of the major banks that I've seen. It's just tremendous. But John, hats off to you. Kudos to you, because you were the one that found that gorgeous property. And I know you're working on another one as well, because that's your heart. So thank you for what you do to make a difference. And as professionals, it's a great example. As professionals, we all have a place that we could serve. I own real estate. I'm not a real estate professional. John is. And he has his expertise that he can bring to the table. Maybe you're a banker or a lender. Again, there's some opportunities there. Maybe you're a financial advisor. You could do some of the things that we do, and that I just giving you some examples on. Maybe you're an attorney or a CPA. but we all have these different disparate skill sets that we can bring them together because nobody's got a corner on all the good ideas. Nobody, not
Yeah.
Tom, myself, John. So John, thank you, my friend. Thanks for chiming in too. Great to have you with us.
Oh, yeah. And we just did one where they didn't have a will, and it was supposedly going to go through a long 18-month probate, but we did a fast track probate and we got it approved in like 2 or 3 weeks. So if any of the people need, when it's non-sophisticated setup, like it's not in a trust and they pass without a trust, and the will, it's going to have to go before probate. So we can help with strategies like that too. And RJ and I are used to meeting and talking regularly, so I'm happy to help any clients you guys may have if they want strategies like that that might be able to help out the family.
Fantastic. Good, good, good. Thank you for that, John. Anybody else that is still with us today, if anybody else wants to unmic themselves and ask a question of Tom or myself, feel free here in the last couple of minutes. Again, we're recording, so if you have to duck off, no worries. But if anybody has a quick question here before we finish up.
Yeah, thanks for sticking around, and please ask any questions. And don't forget the Rady Children's Hospital webinar links RJ can send to you. And I think you might find, especially the third one, because it gets into that family entrepreneurship mentality. And there are a lot of books on entrepreneurship. I don't know of any on family entrepreneurship. So it's a very different concept. And I think you and your clients will really appreciate it.
We'll be including that with our, at least the plan is right now, is to send that out. When we send out today our evaluation, we'll make sure to get those links. And if I don't catch up with our marketing manager before she does that, we'll make sure to get those links out because it's great stuff. I am always the guy in the front row whenever Tom Rogerson is speaking because I just get such great stuff. But that Rady Symposium, hats off to Rady's, is extraordinary. Thanks for what they're doing in the community, obviously, but they're also hosting some phenomenal events, such as the one that Tom and Kathy did recently. Anybody else before we sign off? I'm so glad that John came in and joined us. Anybody else that wants to either have a comment or a question before we sign off?
Well, just one other comment from me, RJ. Tom, I really enjoyed your talk. These last 2 days have been very insightful. Obviously, I represent a lot of real estate clients in Coronado and throughout San Diego County. And you guys give me always some added value information on the approach, the packaging. And I love the example about being simple and elegant, because you're so right. It needs to be elegant and simple. And I just think there's so many different takeaways that I have from these meetings that I'm going to use personally with my clients. And I really appreciate y'all putting this program out because it gave me huge amount of additional insights that I didn't have. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Kathy and I actually do have a client out in San Diego that we just signed the non-disclosure agreement and the contract for what we're going to be doing with them. We're going to be out there then, which means at least every 6 months for maybe the next 1.5 to 2 years. So we'll have reasons to be there. If you have, any of you have people that you'd like to potentially float and maybe have a conversation about, let us know, because if we're going to be there, maybe we could sit down before, after we meet with the other family and just spend a minute with you talking about the client and or meeting the client. So let us know. I think you'd find it. That's the best way to learn this material, by the way. If you organize a family meeting and we come in and do it and you're there, you will learn 10 times more than if we spend a month with you. It's just your ears, your eyes, everything gets bigger when you've got your client in front of you learning the same material.
Yeah, and by the way, I have a personal story about when my daughter was 18 months old. She went in for surgery at Rady Children's Hospital, and it was a life-threatening birth abnormality that they did. And one day I'd like to tell that story in front of anybody that might be part of the Rady Children's charity fundraiser or anything like that, because Rady Children's literally saved my daughter's life.
Wow.
Great story. So certainly you guys can reach out to Tom directly, or you can reach out to us here in San Diego, and then we're coordinating. Tom and I are going to be speaking for, in fact, the 6th oldest Vistage group in America. They've been together actually for over 50 years, some of the members. And one of the newest, youngest members of that group is, in fact, Ernest Rady. But the point in that, and that's public information, so I'm not telling something out of school, but the point of it is that these ideas are not the ideas that even very successful, enormously successful individuals are getting into their water system.
Yeah.
It's something that's why we're passionate about being able to share and build on the great ideas that have already gone in place, but being able to add to that, because again, nobody's got a corner on all the good ideas. So if you've heard some things today that you want to explore further, great, just reach out to us here. We'll coordinate. We can even do a Zoom call, perhaps with Tom and myself. Again, it's all about how can we help you or you and your family, but also you and your clients to get to that place. First of all, identifying and recognizing where they want to get to. That's a starting point. But then to be able to create these conversations that go multi-generationally and to be able to make sure that that family, your family, lasts forever. Why not? Okay. So again, so delighted to have you all with us. God bless. I think we'll put a period on the end of the paragraph, on the end of the chapter on this one, but do reach out to us. And again, please let us know with your response on the surveys, and we'll also get you that information about the Radius Symposium. Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Hey,
you,
RJ,
guys.
thanks a lot.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.